Tonight, someone you love might not wake up tomorrow. No phone call, no hospital, no name on a screen telling you it's over. Just you, a body that used to hold everything you loved in the fire. This has happened to every family, in every generation, for at least 100,000 years, including yours. The average funeral today costs thousands of dollars. Yet no law of nature says you have to spend a cent. No funeral director, no script for what to say, just the weight of deciding what happens next. So what did ancient humans actually do the moment someone in the tribe died? Meet Nok. Tonight his tribe loses someone, and what they do next will surprise you. The answer isn't primitive at all. It's stranger, older, and more human than you'd guess. Because grief, it turns out, might be older than humans themselves. And there's real danger in staying still this long. Big cats and hyenas were always watching from the dark. Here's the first thing they did, and it's the same first thing you do. First, nobody left her alone. Someone stayed awake beside the body, all night, every night. Then, a sleepless watch by firelight. You today, a funeral home viewing. Same instinct, dressed differently. Second, they washed her carefully like she could still feel the water. Third, red ochre, ground by hand and rubbed into the skin. The oldest paint humans ever used. And then the strangest part, they didn't carry her far away. They buried her close, inside camp. They kept sleeping right next to her. Not because they weren't afraid, because they couldn't leave. Even hunting paused. For a day, sometimes more, survival itself took second place to grief. Let's go back as far as the evidence allows, about 100,000 years, to a cave in what is now Israel. Archaeologists found a body curled like it was sleeping, with deer antlers placed in its hands. That's not an accident. Antlers don't end up in dead hands by chance. The site was first dug in the 1930s and later studied for decades by anthropologist Bernard van der Meersch. In 2003, researcher Irela Hovers and her team confirmed something stranger. The ochre here was chosen, not random. At a sister cave, Skull, another skeleton was buried holding the jaw of a wild boar. Then, a boar's jaw chosen with care. You today, a photo, a ring, slipped in beside the body. This is 90,000 years before farming, 95,000 years before writing. Grief came first. Now, jump to a cave called Shanidar in the mountains of Iraq, home to a different kind of human. Neanderthals. For decades, people picture them as brutes. The evidence says otherwise. Their brains, on average, were about the same size as yours. Some studies say slightly bigger. In the 1960s, archaeologist Ralph Seletsky dug up several Neanderthal skeletons here, buried on purpose. One skeleton had clusters of flower pollen packed around the body. Seletsky called it the flower burial. In 1968, palynologist Arlette Leroy-Guerin said the pollen proved the tribe laid flowers on the grave. Then wildflowers laid by hand 60,000 years ago. You today, a bouquet on a casket. Same gesture. But in 1999, researcher Jeffrey Sommer pushed back, arguing burrowing gerbils may have dragged the flowers in. So in 2018, a new team reopened the cave and found an entire new Neanderthal skeleton. In 2020, Cambridge archaeologist Emma Pomeroy showed the body had been placed deliberately, flowers or not. At least 10 Neanderthals were buried at Shanidar in the same spot across many, many years. Moved to France about 50,000 years ago, a cave called La Chapelle-aux-Saints. Here, an old man had almost no teeth left and crippling arthritis. He couldn't hunt, couldn't chew, and yet he lived for years like this. Someone fed him. Someone kept him alive. When he finally died, they didn't leave him where he fell. They dug a pit and laid him in it. In 2013, archaeologist William Rondeau re-examined the site and confirmed this was no accident. It was a burial, then disabled elder fed by hand for years. You today, hospice care. Same instinct, same love. Ironically, This same skeleton's arthritis fooled a scientist in 1911 into drawing Neanderthals as hunched, stupid brutes. That single mistake shaped 100 years of cartoons and movies. The truth took a century to catch up. Now, the hardest part of this story, a cave called La Ferrassie, 41,000 years ago. Here, a 2-year-old child died, and their parents did something no animal instinct alone explains. They dug a small pit, placed the child inside, and set a carved stone slab above. In 2020, researchers Antoine Balzo and Asier Gomez-Olivencia confirmed this too was deliberate. A real burial. This wasn't a one-time grave. La Ferrassie held several bodies, like this shelter was a family's own ground. Then, a marked stone over a child's grave, 41,000 years ago. You today, a small headstone. Same unbearable love. Child burials this old are incredibly rare. Most bodies, adult or child, simply vanished in a time, which makes every one we do find a kind of miracle. Prove someone long ago refused to forget. Quick breath. Heavy, right? Stay with it, because it gets more amazing from here. If this is hitting you somewhere deep, drop a fire emoji below. I read every one. Jump forward to 33,000 years ago. A cave on the coast of what's now Wales. A young man was buried here, his whole body stained red with ochre, head to foot. Beside him, rods carved from mammoth ivory, and a necklace made of hundreds of tiny shells. When it was found in 1823, the discoverer assumed the red bones meant a woman. He named her the Red Lady. He was wrong on both counts. It was a young man, and not even from the Ice Age first guessed. In 2008, scientists Roger Jacoby and Thomas Hyam redated the bones with a new method. 33,000 years old. Then, hours spent painting a body red, dressing it in ivory. You today, choosing the outfit for the casket. Carving those ivory rods by hand could take days. Nobody does that for a stranger. At a site called Sunghir in Russia, 2 children were buried head to head. A whole community's labor poured into their grave. In 2004, researcher Vincenzo Formicola studied their bones and found this wasn't about status. It was about not letting go. 6 sites, 6 graves, thousands of miles and tens of thousands of years apart, all doing the same thing. And this practice never stopped. It just kept evolving all the way to the cemetery down your street. In 1976, anthropologist Paul Rosenblatt studied grief across dozens of human cultures worldwide. Some cultures wail loudly. Some go completely silent. But almost none skip the ritual entirely. In 1999, psychologist John Archer argued grief runs on the same wiring as physical pain. That's why grief physically hurts your chest. Your body isn't exaggerating. It's using an old survival alarm. Then, grief shared out loud in a circle. You today, grief in a quiet room, alone with your phone. In 1996, researchers Klaas, Silverman, and Nickman found something surprising. Healthy grief doesn't mean letting go completely. They called it continuing bonds, keeping a relationship alive in memory, not severing it. Ancient humans did the same. Here's the twist. Humans may not have invented this feeling at all. In 2006, researcher Karen McComb found elephants returned to touch the bones of their own dead again and again. In 2010, primatologist Dora Biro documented chimpanzee mothers carrying their dead infants for weeks. In 2018, a killer whale named Tahlequah carried her dead calf for 17 days across 1,000 miles. In 2015, researcher Kaylee Swift found crows gather around their dead, studying the body for possible danger. It's not exactly a funeral, but it's not nothing either. Something in them notices and remembers. Elephants, chimpanzees, orcas, Neanderthals, humans. Different bodies, the exact same posture of not letting go. But here's what no elephant has ever done. Dig a grave, paint the bones, and mark the spot for later. That single choice, to mark a grave on purpose, might be the oldest evidence of belief in something beyond the body. Even cremation, the fire this whole story started with, is just another way of refusing to let a body vanish. Archaeologist Paul Pettit calls burial one of the very first fingerprints of the human mind. Not a tool, not fire. A grave might be the first proof that we ever truly loved anyone. Back to Knox tribe. In the morning, everyone comes back. Each person leaves one small thing behind. Someone picks up her fire stick. Someone else remembers where she said the clean water was. Knox sits by the grave until the sun goes down. He's not alone. Ash never leaves his side. Then, they return to that grave, season after season. You still visit, still bring flowers. Every grave you've ever stood in front of connects, hand to hand, all the way back to that first one. In a way, graves were humanity's first archive, written in bone and stone before a single word existed. So, what did ancient humans do when someone in a tribe died? They did exactly what you would do. They washed her. They colored her red. They marked the spot. They couldn't let her just disappear. They didn't do it because they believed in ghosts. They did it because they couldn't let go. Same as you. Same human. Different world. If you made it this far, tell me, what's one thing you'd want buried with you? Drop it below. Next time, what happened when two tribes who'd never met came face to face? See you then.